When are you too old for kids shows? If you'd asked me this 2 months ago when I started research for this video, I would have said never. There are countless shows I can think of that have themes kids wouldn't fully understand. Hell, there are some kids shows that pass down generational trauma, and if you haven't watched Watership Down, then I pray you never have to. But clearly not everyone thinks this way. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a social stigma. Some people think that kid shows are for kids. It's in the name. And they think that if you watch them, you're either a man-child, autistic, or a disappointment. And as someone that makes YouTube videos, it's pretty clear which one I am. If you think I'm lying, they even had to make new covers for the Harry Potter books so adults wouldn't feel embarrassed reading them. Isn't that kind of sad? A line always seems to be drawn when someone tries to be themselves or express some kind of childish joy. So then I got to thinking, if I don't agree with this line, where would I draw mine? Some shows have to be for kids. Shows like Dora the Explorer, Peppa Pig, or whatever the hell Coco Melon is. But why do I draw the line there? And where does that line end? Knee-deep in research, the answer to my question has become, I'm TW Halfling, and I was wondering, when are you too old for kids shows? I can't cover all kids shows, so if I miss your favourite one, let me know in the comments on where you think it stands. Let's start with something easy, a show designed almost exclusively for children, Teletubbies. If you were a child or a parent in the 90s or the early 2000s, you've probably heard of this show. It was a BBC show that aired from 1997 to 2018. For those of you unaware, Teletubbies was a show about Teletubbies, Tinky Winky, Dipsy, La and Poe. Slightly unsettling alien beings with TVs for stomachs. In later seasons, they're actually Tiddlytubbies, which are baby Teletubbies. This suggests an ability for the species to breed. How, you might ask? Well, if you look at their genitals, they're clearly gendered. The curly ones are women, and the rigid ones are men. So to reproduce, they clearly... Ruined childhood aside, the best way to prove the whole show is for children would be to pick a random episode. So that's exactly what I did. Season 1, Episode 23, Dirty Knees. The Teletubbies appear one by one with dirty knees, and then use their futuristic alien technology to summon sponges. They then clean themselves off, but they realise Poe is missing, and she appears, covered in mud. They chase her around and eventually all clean her together, which feels wrong now that we know what we know. Honestly, upon rewatching, it's
dirty knees, dirty knees, dirty knees, dirty knees.
Mind-numbing. It's filled with bright colours and nonsensical noises, perfect for very young children and anyone who grew up with TikTok. It's pure, distilled stimulation. The show doesn't grab your attention, it shackles it for the entire duration, and that's exactly what parents are hoping it will do. But that isn't why we're talking about this show. I was proving a point, and I said the best way to do that was to pick a random episode. So I did it again, and again, and again. Charming characters, silly noises, colours and lights vibrant enough to give you epilepsy. A show truly made for the sole purpose of entertaining young children. No complicated plot lines, character development, or anything else really. The visual equivalent of a sugar rush. I'm not bashing you if you are an adult and you do enjoy this kind of stuff. I don't do drugs, but I think this is probably the kind of thing I would imagine a trip to be like. But you could put a lot of other kids shows here. More bright colours, more noises, more nonsense. Most adults, and even children, will grow out of these shows fairly quickly. You start to crave things with a little bit more substance. After all, being a grown-up isn't about nonsense and fun, it's about serious business like the grind, taxes, and playing house. If no one can afford houses, you might as well pretend, right? So what happens when kids shows touch on adult themes or add in things that kids wouldn't be able to understand? If you're watching this, you've likely heard of Bluey, an Australian animated series aimed at preschoolers. If you haven't, you should check it out. To fill you in, Bluey stars Bluey, a 6-year-old girl and her family. As you can see, most of the characters in the series are breeds of dog, and typical to mutant wildlife in Australia, these ones aren't normal. They're bipedal and can talk.
You know I like to smack my bum as hard as I can.
Bluey is silly, cute, and has easily digestible lessons. Lessons like sharing is important, rules are there for a reason, and how to cope with death. Did I mention this was for preschoolers? In Copycat, Season 1, Episode 38, it starts off with some light-hearted, goofy antics from Bluey. She's copying everything her dad does as a game. To get Bluey to give up, Bandit decides to go for a long walk and they come across an injured budgie. Bluey's concern for the bird brings the game to a halt, and Bandit teaches her how to make a safe travel box for it so they can take it to the vet. But this is a kids show, so everything's gonna be okay, right?
I don't know, he looked pretty knocked around.
Not a few seconds later, the lady comes back out and tells them that the budgie died. This is all fairly sudden, and Bluey, being only 6, doesn't fully grasp the situation. In the car home, Bluey says she doesn't want the budgie to have died.
Me neither. But there's nothing we can do.
And asks her dad if he's sure it won't get better.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Bluey then tries to reenact the scene with Bingo. She finds the injured bird, puts it in a shoebox, and takes the budgie to the vet. Chili is playing the role of the receptionist, but she tries to help with a happy ending by letting Bluey know
Your bird is okay.
But Bluey corrects her.
The budgie's dead.
Oh.
The show does an amazing job of displaying the importance of learning through play and coming to terms with difficult things in a safer environment. That is, until the budgie bursts into the room and starts flapping around, avoiding Bluey's attempts to grab her. But now, Bluey has truly learned the lesson her dad was trying to teach. Some things are out of your control, and you need to accept that and move on in order to be happy.
Nothing we can do. It's out of our hands.
But you could make the argument that it's simple enough that some preschoolers would understand it. I'm not convinced, but maybe they could get the basics. Well, how about this? Baby Race, Season 2, Episode 47. If you still have doubts, then you won't after this. The episode starts with Bluey comparing her monkey bar skills against Bingo, and then judo, and this prompts Chili to tell them about a story from the past, all the way back to when Bluey was a baby. Bluey learned to roll over very quickly. Taking pride in this moment, Chili proceeds to use it as a bragging point, until one day in the mother's group, the aforementioned judo is the first baby to sit up on their own. Again, very early compared to the average.
Oh goodness, that's very early to be sitting. It's not a race.
Chili took this as a race.
A baby race!
After a lot of help and practice, Bluey sat up on her own, moments before judo crawls across the floor. Chili was so concerned about winning this race that she took Bluey to the doctors, but obviously there was nothing wrong. Eventually, Bluey settles on a new mode of transport, the classic bum shuffle. But judo is pulling themselves up onto furniture, the step right before walking, so Chili goes to the doctors again. And obviously, there's still nothing wrong with Bluey. Chili once again tries her best to get Bluey to catch up, and Bluey ends up crawling backwards. Another doctor trip, and another case of a normal healthy baby. Bluey's grandmother steps in to help with an old school remedy, oil on the knees, and if the knees are too slippery, the baby will be forced to learn how to use something else. It makes sense on paper, but it's dangerous and cruel. There's a reason it isn't common practice anymore.
This isn't legal anymore.
But as Linkin Park once said, in the end, it doesn't even matter. Because judo won the baby race, and was the first to toddle around.
Are you upset with me that I lost the baby race?
But Chili puts her at ease. She was disappointed with herself and stopped going to Mother's group. In comes Bella, Coco's mum, and a national treasure of a woman. Throughout the episode, she has always been celebrating Bluey's achievements with Chili, and noticing that Chili hadn't been to Mother's group, she decides to check in on her. It turns out Bella has 8 children.
No, I've got 8 kids. Wait, no, 9.
Or 9, and now she can pass on some of her motherly wisdom to Chili. We see from Chili's perspective as Bella looks directly into the camera and says,
You're doing great.
It brings tears to Chili's eyes. And if you look around, many other parents as well, because many parents, especially with their first child, end up like Chili. When doing something you've never done before, you look for comparison as a benchmark. How well are you doing compared to the average, or those around you? But everyone learns at their own pace, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's the lesson you're taught in this episode, and it finishes up with Chili accepting that, and having a lot more fun just playing with Bluey without expectations. And this lets her act with the same maturity that Bella displayed all episode, and she celebrates judo walking and beginning to talk. This one is clearly for the parents. The lesson is for them, the themes are ones only they will relate to, and although it's a bit more broadly applicable, it holds much more meaning and relatability for them. Children of that age wouldn't have a good chance of understanding the specifics, and Bella wasn't talking to them anyway. Sometimes, parenting is a thankless job, and the show is letting you know that your efforts are appreciated. They're speaking for your children, and giving you a message you likely won't hear for years to come. But despite all of this, it's still clearly a kids show. It's designed for preschoolers, and most of its themes and stylistic choices reflect that. But if you look around online, there are a fair amount of parents and other adults that enjoy the show just as, if not more than, kids. So we're clearly on to something here. Maybe it'll be clearer with the next show. Keeping on the theme of cartoon dogs, how about we talk about a show a little bit closer to my heart? Courage the Cowardly Dog. If you watched this as a child, you likely recall the episodes I'm going to talk about, because if you close your eyes, they still haunt you. I say this because that isn't usually something you consider when making great kids shows, and this is a kids show. It aired on Cartoon Network from 1999 to 2002. Episodes were even featured on the VHS versions of several Scooby-Doo films as bonus content, so it was clearly designed for a similar audience. To clue you in, Courage the Cowardly Dog is a show about Courage the Cowardly Dog. Am I overusing this bit? He was abandoned as a puppy and adopted from a dumpster by Muriel and Eustace Bagg. Muriel and Eustace lived in an isolated farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, aka Kansas, and this place becomes Courage's new home. Muriel is your archetypal caring grandmother. She does all the cooking and cleaning, is kind and compassionate, and greatly underappreciated by her partner, Eustace. And Eustace is your archetypal grumpy old man. He yells at Courage, "Stupid dog!" berates him constantly, and his sour nature is trumped only by his greed.
And that means I get $1 million.
But this alone wouldn't make for an interesting story. You need a supernatural twist. Nowhere is plagued by odd occurrences and villainous residents, and each episode involves Courage overcoming his cowardly nature to save his family. Some of the animations were truly haunting. King Ramses' Curse,
Return the slab.
The Mask, and the House of Discontent being perfect examples of this. These episodes upset the children watching them, and even the adults as well. But being a horror show doesn't mean it can't be enjoyed by kids. So I'm going to address some of the themes of the episodes, because whilst Bluey represents difficult themes in a way that's safe and easily digested, Courage the Cowardly Dog will shove these themes down your throat, not even expecting you to be able to swallow them, and knowing you'll never be the same if you do. Let's have a look at some of the worst offenders. Season 1, Episode 4, Freaky Fred. Fred is Muriel's nephew. He narrates his experiences in rhyme.
My name is Fred. The words you hear are in my head.
Until he talks about his urge.
And I've been very naughty.
Eustace calls Fred a freak and does his best to avoid him. But you're meant to take this with a pinch of salt, given who it comes from. But everything about Fred is unnerving. He bears a creepy Cheshire smile. He repeatedly informs the viewer
I've been naughty.
and he is the first antagonist that has been a human. As we see from Courage's guess, he expects monsters to be monstrous, obviously evil or dangerous, like kid shows and wives' tales would clearly telegraph. But this makes Fred so much worse, because he doesn't look like a monster, he just is one. When Fred arrives, Eustace tells everybody about the bathroom door.
Just don't try shutting it, cause you won't be able to get it open.
Courage is instructed to guide Fred to the bathroom, and Eustace ends up locking the two of them inside together. He then ventures off to get something to free them from the faulty lock, but he just wants to avoid Fred, so does anything but that, leaving Courage trapped with Fred, and Fred free to be
Quite naughty.
The show presents Fred's naughtiness through an obsession with hair.
Your hair.
He became a barber specifically because of this obsession, and they took heavy inspiration from Sweeney Todd for this. But whilst Todd murders his victims, it's insinuated that Fred may do something far worse. In classic serial killer fashion, Fred's experimentation with his urges starts with animals, specifically his hamster, which he shaves bald. He then regales Courage of how he did the same thing to his first love, a little girl. You can see from their expressions that they were clearly upset or angry with his actions, but the metaphor isn't distinctly clear. They need to muddy the waters with insinuation and ambiguity as it's a kids' show. But what is clear is that he succumbed to his urges and violated pets and people against their will. Many interpret this as hand-waving murder, but I think another interpretation is quite clear. Whilst he tells these tales, he is forcibly shaving off all of Courage's fur. With each story he tells, he takes off a new section, and with only a small patch left, he beckons Courage over to willingly take part and to measure how broken he has made him.
Courage.
If you didn't see the alternative to murder before, I think you can tell what brand of naughty Fred might partake in. And what's worse, Muriel hears this struggle, but she trusts her nephew and assumes Courage is hungry or they're having fun. At one point she turns on the TV just to ignore the situation. Courage manages to call for help, and Fred is taken away in a straitjacket. But this episode is a clear warning about how family members can be predators, and the episode ends with a signature of sorts on Courage's behind. And Fred says,
What's the harm if I was slightly naughty?
Showing no remorse for his actions. Despite how horrific that was, the episode I remember the most was the season 1 finale, The Great Fusilli. The incident of the day is introduced fairly early on, this time being Fusilli and his travelling theatre. Courage is curious, and Muriel is convinced by Fusilli that she could be a star. So, despite Eustace's grumbling and refusals, they succumb to the promise of stardom and fame. The condition is
You stay forever.
typical of the show. Courage is the only one who notices something wrong and does his best to warn Muriel, but she steps to centre stage and begins reading from the script.
Oh my!
Muriel then proceeds to juggle, exceptionally well, until Eustace interrupts. Fusilli invites them both to join, and to sell Eustace on it, he says,
You be rich.
Eustace is easily won over. Courage once again tries to warn them against this, but as always, he is ignored. So he decides that if his family's going to join, he should join too to avoid being separated from them. Fusilli explains that once you feel the adoration of the audience, you won't want to leave the stage. After a performance, Courage goes to clean himself up, leaving Muriel and Eustace at the mercy of Fusilli.
Now You belong to Fossili.
And with that ominous comment, we swap over to Courage discovering a room filled with humanoid puppets from all walks of life, and the camera zooms into a set of hooks with the names of our main cast. The show writers have opted to swap foreshadowing for neon lights so that even young children could keep up. After all, this is a kids' show. Strings descend from the ceiling and turn Muriel and Eustace into puppets, with Fusilli at their reins. Courage tries to free Muriel, but Fusilli seems happy to dispose of him now that he has the puppets he was after, showing that they are well and truly under his control. Fusilli uses the bodies of the Bag family for his own amusement. Muriel turns against her good nature and is forced to repeatedly beat her husband, and not a single complaint leaves Eustace's lips. Scared by Courage's sudden bravery and his ghostly appearance, Fusilli jumps onto the stage and enters the spotlight as Courage runs off with his family. It appears that not even Fusilli can resist the allure of his magic stage, as he performs for the non-existent audience, and he too pays the price of stardom and becomes a puppet of the stage. Back at home, Courage has safely secured his family and once again saved the day. He is what I would be saying if this was your average kids show. You see, the reason this episode is so fresh in my mind still after all these years is its ending. It's not a happy one. There's no peaceful resolution or closure. What you're left with is the traumatizing scene of Courage playing with the corpses of his family to keep up the delusion of normal life. And the final note of the episode, he breaks the fourth wall by holding the closing circle of the cartoon and looks directly into the camera to say,
The things I do for love.
I could go on about how this episode is a metaphor for the struggles of being an artist and how abusive corporations and others can be when they know people are desperate to fulfill their dreams. But that isn't the point of this video. This is about whether you can be too old for kids shows, and you're never too old for important lessons. Courage uses shock value and horror to help these lessons stick with you for life. And it worked, because I remember sitting there as a child, horrified at the realization that for the rest of that poor dog's life, he would be puppeting his parents' corpses and continuing the abuse he experienced from Eustace, simply because anything was better than being alone again. In small doses, presented in different ways, these could be important lessons for kids. Learning that not all adults are trustworthy, even if they're family, is one that can keep you safe from a very real danger. But these lessons are purposefully presented in a way that shocks and repulses you, not exactly the best way to teach kids about things. Which makes you wonder if this is the kind of thing they're showing to kids. Can you ever be too old for kids shows? Honestly, I could have taken that last section a number of ways. The point was to prove that some kids shows really push the boundaries of what the title means. These are the kind of shows you were likely thinking of when you saw this question. All of them have a sizable adult following. Why? Well, I need to keep this part brief, because if I go into detail here, you'd be watching one of those 4-hour video essays, and I don't want to put you through that. The reason these shows do so well for older audiences is because they're more than simple kid shows. They cover real and difficult adult topics, have nuanced characters that develop over time, and have some incredible theme songs. Atla is literally a show about a genocide crusade by the Fire Nation, but it's also a coming-of-age show about responsibility and life lessons from Uncle Iroh. You might not understand a lot of this as a kid, even an older one, but have you really watched Atla if you didn't understand Zuko's redemption arc? You could pick and choose any of these shows and plenty more. You could go into the complex themes they address, how well written the characters are, and what a powerful impact they had on you, regardless of age. And that's kind of the point of this video. You will inevitably outgrow certain kid shows. You won't care for the overstimulation or the degradation of your attention spans. You'll crave more than just the two-dimensional nature of the plot lines and characters, and you'll get to an age where you might want something a bit more naughty. And kid shows just can't scratch that itch. But as long as there's still something for you, even if it's just the occasional high you get from nostalgia bait, then you're never truly too old for kids shows. And if you get to a point where you are, perhaps it's time to start making your own, because you clearly have a lot of experience that you could lend to others that need it. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so here. If you'd like a deeper look at a particular episode of a kids show, I have a video here just for that. Or YouTube thinks you might like this one. Thanks for watching and keep wondering. TW Halfling out.